I want you to imagine just for a moment that you are walking into a really crowded, bustling room right now.
Okay, setting the scene. I like it.
Right. So let's say it is the year 2026. You look around, and everyone in this room is speaking a completely different
Like
language.
a real mixing pot.
Exactly. So over by the window, there's this highly technical, really heated debate happening in Mandarin. And then at the coffee table, a couple people are laughing over a highly nuanced joke told in Arabic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and someone brushes past you, muttering apologies in some regional dialect of German. But the thing is, you aren't confused at all.
Not even a little bit.
Not a bit. You aren't desperately reaching for a dictionary app on your phone or sweating as you try to recall your high school vocabulary.
Right, because of the tech.
Exactly, because you're wearing a pair of sleek, completely normal-looking smart glasses, and as your eyes dart around the room, those glasses are actively painting flawless, real-time English subtitles directly over the real world.
It's just wild to even picture that.
It really is. And at the exact same time, there is a small, super discreet smart ring on your index finger, and it's wirelessly whispering the most perfectly context-aware translations directly into an invisible earpiece.
With like no lag at all.
Zero delay, zero confusion. It is entirely 100% frictionless, which leaves us with a terrifying question. Is the human brain about to forget how to speak?
I mean, it is the defining educational and cultural anxiety of our current decade, honestly. We've really reached a point where the physical barriers of human speech are effectively invisible.
Yeah, they really are.
The hardware and the software have finally converged to make that hypothetical room you just described a completely mundane reality. And, well, it forces us to interrogate a very specific paradigm.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission today is to completely tear apart the central theme. Do we still need to learn English in the AI era, or, any second language, really?
Right. It's a huge shift.
Because for decades, learning English was the ultimate milestone. It was the recognized global lingua franca. If you wanted to succeed in international business or publish in academia or just travel the world with confidence, you just had to put in the hours.
You had to do the work. There was no shortcut.
Exactly. And I want you, the listener, to think about your own life right now. Think about all the hours you've spent memorizing endless vocabulary lists.
Oh, the flashcards?
Yes, think about staring at flashcards, just crying over irregular verbs, trying to figure out syntax and grammar rules that seem to have absolutely no logical consistency at all.
It's exhausting just thinking about
It really is. So is all of that human capital, all of that immense mental energy, suddenly completely obsolete now that an algorithm wrapped around your finger can operate with less than 200 milliseconds of delay?
Well, to answer that, we have to pull from a remarkably diverse set of disciplines for this deep dive.
Yeah, we've got a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. We're going to look at the latest technology market forecasts, detailing the sheer financial force behind these ambient wearables.
Yeah.
But we have to go far beyond just the tech itself.
Right, because it's not just about shiny new gadgets.
Exactly. We're going to dive deep into neurobiology, specifically looking at some groundbreaking EEG studies out of the MIT Media Lab on how outsourcing cognitive load actually alters the physical architecture of our brains.
Which is just mind-blowing.
It's incredible. And we'll also examine reports from the front lines of global business and immigration law, where this technology is, well, failing spectacularly.
Yeah, and with huge consequences.
Huge. And perhaps most importantly, we're going to ground this all in the philosophy of language. We have to explore how this frictionless technology threatens to rewrite our neural pathways and fundamentally flatten the entire landscape of global culture.
So I want to start by establishing just how staggeringly good the hardware has become. Because if we don't really understand the capability, the whole debate over should we still learn a language feels purely academic.
Right. And it's definitely not just academic.
No, it's an immediate practical dilemma. We've experienced this massive paradigm shift. I mean, think about it. Just a few years ago, translation tech was incredibly active and, frankly, incredibly awkward.
Oh, so clunky.
Right. It meant pulling out your smartphone, opening a clunky app, hitting a microphone button, and then shoving the phone into a confused stranger's face.
And just praying your cellular data didn't drop mid-sentence.
Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
But now it is entirely ambient, and the financial markets are totally reflecting this. I was reading a market forecast for this deep dive that showed projections for these AI-enabled language tools growing from $2.4 billion just a couple of years ago to over $11.3 billion by 2033.
That is a staggering amount of money.
It's a torrential downpour of capital funding this exact frictionless reality.
And, that capital is relentlessly focused on a single psychological goal,
Which is?
removing the user from the process entirely. The shift from active use to ambient presence changes our fundamental relationship with translation.
Like it just fades into the background.
Exactly. It's no longer an interruption to a conversation. It's an underlying, invisible condition of our environment.
So let's break down the specific hardware ecosystems that are actually driving this, because it's honestly just wild. First, you have devices like the Plod Note Pin.
Oh, right, the little clip-on device.
Yeah, it's essentially an ambient voice recorder you just clip right onto your shirt, and it boasts 98% transcription accuracy across multiple languages, doing real-time AI summarization.
Wow, 98% is incredible.
I know. So imagine you're in a professional meeting with stakeholders from, let's say, 6 different countries.
Yeah.
This pin is silently capturing the audio, translating it instantly, and generating localized, properly formatted documentation for everyone in their native tongue.
So nobody in the room even has to think about the fact that they don't share a single language.
Nobody. It's totally seamless. And then you have the visual layer, the Ray-Ban Meta Gen 2 smart glasses. They're using what's called waveguide display technology mixed with highly directional microphones.
And those directional microphones are actually the crucial leap forward here.
Really? How so?
Well, for decades, the absolute hardest hurdle for AI audio processing was the cocktail party problem.
Oh, right. Trying to hear one person in a noisy room?
Exactly. If you're in a crowded room, early AI just couldn't distinguish the target voice, the person you actually want to hear, from the background noise and the clinking glasses and the music.
So how do they actually solve that mechanically? Because I've tried using voice-to-text in a crowded bar, and it usually just spits out absolute gibberish.
Oh, totally. Well, it relies on a technique called acoustic beamforming, which is often combined with phase arrays in the microphones.
Okay, break that down for me.
Sure. Essentially, instead of one microphone capturing everything equally, the glasses have multiple tiny microphones. By measuring the microscopic differences in the time it takes a sound wave to hit each individual microphone, the software can pinpoint the exact physical location of the sound source.
That is wild.
But the real genius of the smart glasses is that they sync this audio beamforming with your visual gaze.
Wait, really? So it knows what I'm looking at?
Exactly. The AI knows exactly where your head is turned. It isolates the audio of the specific person you are looking at, mutes the rest of the room algorithmically, and projects the translated text right into the waveguide display in your lenses.
That is just incredible. And it goes even further with open source ecosystems like Omi and Bee.
Right, the always-on wearables.
Yeah, these aren't just translating word for word. They are gathering immense amounts of real-time context. They understand the tone of your voice. They index the history of your conversations. They even know what meetings you attended earlier in the day.
It's like having an assistant that knows everything about your day.
Exactly. It's personal reflection and summarization without any language barriers whatsoever. And finally, you have devices like the Muse Ring one.
The smart ring.
Right. It combines biometric tracking, so your heart rate, your stress levels, with subtle AI linguistic triggers. You can literally trigger a translation or send a localized response with just a micro gesture of your finger. Having these wearables is really like having a universal remote for human speech constantly running in the background.
Just point, click, and understand.
Yes, exactly.
The universal remote is a highly apt analogy, honestly. But what I find truly fascinating about the development of these multi-billion-dollar translation architectures, things like Meta's seamless M4T model, is their stated origin point.
Oh, yeah. This is my favorite part of the research.
It's so good. If you read the engineering white papers and listen to the developers, the benchmark they are chasing didn't originate in a sterile corporate lab. It actually originated in 1970s comedic science fiction.
I absolutely loved reading about this. The tech engineers literally used the babblefish as their gold standard.
Yes, the Babel.
For anyone who hasn't read Douglas Adams' brilliant novel, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the babblefish is this small, yellow, leech-like alien creature.
Very attractive.
Oh, gorgeous. You stick it deep into your ear, and it feeds on the brainwave energy of the people around you, and it instantly translates any spoken language in the universe into your native tongue.
Right, and Douglas Adams just used it as a hilarious philosophical joke to prove the non-existence of God.
Exactly. But here we are in 2026, and it is the literal blueprint for investors and consumer electronics. We have spent Billions of dollars to build a digital Babelfish.
We really have. And by building it, we have inadvertently sparked a massive philosophical dialectic.
Deep polarization, really.
Yes, a deep polarization in how we view the necessity of human cognitive effort. On one side, you have the technological pragmatists, and they view language purely as a utility. To them, language is nothing more than a mechanism for the transfer of raw data from point A to point B.
And, I want to push back here on behalf of those pragmatists because, honestly, their argument is incredibly compelling.
It's a very strong argument. Let's hear it.
Okay, let's say I am a global supply chain manager. I oversee a manufacturing plant in Vietnam. I manage logistics out of Germany, and I coordinate distribution in the United States.
Sounds like a stressful job.
Very. And my primary goal, my entire job description, the very thing I am paid a salary to do, relies purely on speed and clarity. A misunderstanding in a shipping manifest means delays, which means millions of dollars lost.
Right. There's zero room for error.
Exactly. So if my smart ring and my glasses can translate specialized, highly technical logistical data perfectly between Vietnamese, German, and English in under 200 milliseconds, why on earth would I spend thousands of hours over years of my life learning to speak intermediate German?
Right. Why bother?
Yeah. From a purely utilitarian standpoint, isn't learning a language a massive waste of my human capital?
What's fascinating here is that, strictly within the parameters of transactional utility, your argument is entirely correct.
Oh, really?
Yes. For pure logistics, the functional barrier of language has been entirely eradicated. There is a brilliant example of this in the digital infrastructure world with platforms like Discourse.
Oh, okay. How does that work?
Well, Discourse forums now have features where a Japanese developer can log in, navigate the interface, read a sprawling community thread, and reply entirely in Japanese.
Okay.
Meanwhile, an English-speaking developer in that exact same thread is reading those exact same interactions in flawless natural English. There are no clunky banners that say translated by AI.
Wow. So it's totally invisible.
The translation is completely invisible. It happens at the server level before it even reaches the browser. In that highly specific scenario, AI isn't just a helpful tool, it is a superior, infinitely scalable medium for data transfer.
Right. It just works. It's the ultimate efficiency. If my goal is to figure out why a line of code is broken, I really don't care about the cultural nuance of the developer in Tokyo. I just need the data.
Exactly. But that efficiency is a localized triumph. The danger arises when we apply that same transactional logic to the entirety of human interaction.
Ah, right. It doesn't scale to real life.
No, it doesn't. When we view language merely as data transfer, we begin to ignore what language actually is. And that brings us to the unseen, profound cultural consequences of relying on the machine for all our communication.
So if it works so well for supply chains and code forums, why not use it for everything? Let's follow that thread, because this leads us directly into the concept of English 2.0 and what researchers are calling the loop of homogenization.
Yes.
And I have to admit, when I was reading through the mechanics of this for the deep dive, I found it frankly terrifying.
It is very concerning. To understand the threat of English 2.0, we have to look beneath the sleek interface of your smart glasses and understand how these massive generative AI systems actually function under the hood.
Right, because it's not magic.
Far from it. They are not pulling translations out of the ether. They do not actually understand language. They are, at their core, high-dimensional pattern matching algorithms.
Okay, so just super advanced math.
Exactly. They operate using vector spaces, mathematically predicting the probability of the next word based on colossal data sets of digitized text. And what language makes up the overwhelming majority of the digitized internet?
English. I mean, it's not even close.
Precisely. Because of historical, economic, and technological structural biases, English is the dominant training data. The vector clusters for English are incredibly dense and highly refined.
So the AI is just naturally better at English.
Much better. The models naturally perform significantly better with much more nuance in English than in any other language. English has basically been cemented as the de facto operating system of the digital world.
Which creates this massive, dangerous feedback loop.
Yeah.
Let me break down how the mechanics of that loop actually work, because it's wild.
Please do.
Let's say you're a non-native English speaker. Maybe you're a brilliant medical researcher in Brazil or a startup founder in Thailand.
Okay.
To reach a global audience or to get your paper published in a prestigious journal or get venture capital funding, you really need to present your ideas in English. So instead of writing organically and struggling through the translation yourself, You use a generative AI to draft your proposal.
Which makes sense. It saves time.
Right. But the AI spits out highly standardized, perfectly grammatically correct, but very rigid, predictable English. And then you publish that document online.
And what happens next?
Well, the next generation of AI models, say GPT-6 or GPT-7, they scrape the internet for new training data, and they ingest that AI-generated text. They train their neural networks on it.
It is an algorithmic Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
We have millions of non-native speakers relying on AI to generate standard English. That algorithm English populates the web. Future AI trains on that homogenized text, reinforcing the exact same probable word choices.
So it just gets more and more generic.
Exactly. What is lost in this relentless mathematical cycle are all the things that make language uniquely human. The local idioms, the regional quirks, the beautiful imperfections of a second language speaker infusing their native cultural syntax into English.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Isn't a standardized global language kind of the utopian dream? I mean, people invented Esperanto hoping the whole world would just speak one perfectly logical, unified language to prevent misunderstandings and wars and everything.
That was the idea, yes.
So why is homogenization necessarily a bad thing? Why do we care if the rough edges get sanded down?
Because sanding down the rough edges means erasing the culture embedded within them. What researchers are calling English 2.0 is a perfectly sterile algorithmic average. When you marginalize rich, complex local dialects in favor of a probabilistic mean, you actually restrict the spectrum of human thought.
Wow.
The words we use literally dictate the concepts we can grasp.
It's like taking a beautifully diverse global culinary world and deciding that just to ensure nobody ever gets an upset stomach, every single restaurant on Earth will now only serve slightly different variations of a plain vanilla milkshake.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right. Like, yes, it's globally digestible. Yes, it's efficient, but it's entirely devoid of flavor. The tech was ostensibly designed to break down language barriers, but it might actually be paving over them completely. We are turning human expression into a giant parking lot of standardized English.
That parking lot metaphor strikes right at the heart of the philosophical debates surrounding this technology. We are currently watching the Silicon Valley view of language collide head-on with the actual philosophy of language itself.
Yeah, the tension is huge.
Specifically, this tension perfectly mirrors the theories of the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein.
Yes, I was absolutely fascinated by the inclusion of Wittgenstein in this discussion. Can you break down his theories for us?
Yeah.
Because he completely dismantles the Silicon Valley idea that language is just a utility for transferring data.
I'd love to. It's important to look at his later work, though, because early in his career, Wittgenstein actually believed something somewhat akin to the AI model, that language was a logical picture of the world, a direct mapping of words to facts.
Like X equals Y.
Exactly. But in his later philosophy, particularly in his posthumous book Philosophical Investigations, he completely reversed course. He argued vehemently against the idea that language is simply a mechanism for attaching labels to inner thoughts or transferring raw data. He introduced this concept of language games.
Language games, I really love that term. How does he actually define a game in this context?
He posited that language is a shared human activity. It is inextricably embedded in our daily practices, our unspoken cultural rules, and our lived physical experiences.
Okay, so it's not just data.
No, not at all. Meaning is not found in a dictionary definition. Meaning is found in use. The game is the context.
So, to use an example, if I am sitting in a room with you and I say, it's cold in here, I'm not just transferring meteorological data to your brain. Depending on the context, the game we are currently playing, I might be subtly asking you to stand up and close a window. Or I might be complaining about the building's landlord. Or if we're trapped in an awkward silence in an elevator, I might just be making small talk to relieve the social tension.
Exactly. The words are exactly the same. The machine translates, the raw data temperature is low, but the human feels the context. And this is the insurmountable hurdle for generative AI. An AI system does not possess consciousness. It does not have a physical body that shivers when it feels the cold.
It has no idea what being cold even feels like.
Right. It has no cultural memory of awkward elevator rides. It has no vulnerability. It merely simulates understanding by mapping the probabilistic patterns of how the word cold usually follows other words in its training data.
It's totally hollow.
It is playing a mathematical game of prediction, whereas we are playing a deeply human game of shared embodied experience.
Which brings up a phenomenal perspective from the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Their director for education and skills issued a stark warning about this exact philosophical divide.
Yes, that was a very powerful statement.
They stated that the goal of education systems worldwide cannot simply be to produce humans who are perfectly reliant on automated prompts and algorithmic translations. The goal is to build first-class humans who have the capacity to read between the lines and, crucially, to hear what remains unsaid.
And hearing what remains unsaid requires an architecture that AI completely lacks.
Brushes.
Empathy. And this brings us to a concept discussed in behavioral psychology literature as the empathy deficit.
Yes, I want you, the listener, to really reflect on what learning and speaking a foreign language actually requires of you as a human being. It requires immense, uncomfortable vulnerability.
Is not easy.
Not at all. If you have ever traveled to a foreign country where you barely speak the language, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You walk into a bakery in Paris, you want a specific pastry. You try to order it, you completely mangle the French pronunciation. The baker looks at you with this mix of confusion and pity.
We've all been there.
Right. You blush deeply, you stammer, you try again, you point, and finally they smile, they understand, and they hand you the pastry. It is a humbling, sometimes deeply embarrassing struggle. But in that friction, in that awkward struggle, you are bridging a cultural divide through sheer human effort.
You're showing respect.
Exactly. You are silently signaling to that baker, I value your culture enough to look foolish trying to speak your words.
And that vulnerability is the friction that sparks true intercultural empathy. When you remove the struggle, when the smart glasses and the ring handle the transaction flawlessly, you remain securely inside your own linguistic bubble.
You never leave your comfort zone.
Never. The interaction is downgraded to a sterile exchange of goods. If language has become nothing more than vector codes deciphered invisibly by machines, our capacity to actually discover the nuance of another culture diminishes. We gain incredible transactional efficiency, but we suffer a profound empathy deficit.
We are essentially trading a human handshake for an automated receipt.
That's beautifully put.
Thanks. So, okay, we have established that the cultural and philosophical arguments against outsourcing language are incredibly strong. Relying on AI might make our writing sterile, it strips the context out of our language games, and it makes our intercultural interactions much less empathetic.
Yes, all true.
But let's move from the theoretical to the biological. What is this lack of friction physically doing to the organic hardware inside our skulls?
Here's where it gets really interesting. This is where the debate moves from philosophy into hard science. The argument for the continued necessity of language learning is most starkly and alarmingly visible in neurobiology.
I was absolutely captivated by a study I read from the MIT Media Lab on this.
It's a landmark study.
They conducted an electroencephalography, or EEG, study to measure the actual neural and behavioral consequences of relying on large language models, like ChatGPT, for cognitive tasks.
For our listeners who might not be familiar with the mechanics, an EEG is a non-invasive test that measures the electrical activity in the brain.
Right, the little sticky sensors.
Exactly. Researchers place small metal discs with thin wires on the scalp. These electrodes detect tiny electrical charges that result from the activity of your brain cells. By tracking these brain waves, researchers can see in real time the cognitive load, the level of focus, and the neural engagement a person is experiencing during a specific task.
It's a direct window into how hard the brain's engine is actually working.
Precisely.
For this study, the MIT researchers divided participants into 3 distinct operational groups and gave them a complex cognitive writing and synthesis task. Let's break down these 3 groups because the data they produced is a massive wake-up call.
Let's do it. Group 1.
Group 1 was the brain-only group. They were given no external digital tools whatsoever, just a prompt, a blank page, and their own minds.
Old school.
Completely old school. And their EEG readings showed exactly what you would hope to see. The strongest, most widely distributed neural networks firing all across the brain.
High engagement.
Very high. When tested later, they had incredibly high memory recall of the arguments they had actually written and their writing output. It had unique structural variety. It sounded like individual humans wrote it. They also self-reported a very high sense of ownership over their work.
Makes total sense. Then you had Group 2, the search engine group.
Right.
They were allowed to use standard web searches to gather information and facts, but they still had to synthesize the arguments and write the text themselves. Their EEGs showed a very healthy, moderate level of engagement. Crucially, There was significant activation in the prefrontal cortex.
And what does the prefrontal cortex handle biologically? Like, why is that important?
It is the region of the brain responsible for complex cognitive behavior, personality expression, decision-making, and moderating social behavior.
Oh, wow. The heavy lifting.
Exactly. In the context of this task, it's the center for synthesizing diverse, conflicting pieces of external information into a coherent, original thought. Group two's output reflected this. It was a balanced mix of external facts and original human synthesis.
Okay, and then we get to group three, the LLM-reliant group. They use generative AI to help draft, translate, and write the task.
And the EEG results here are genuinely alarming.
Really alarming.
Yeah.
They exhibited the absolute weakest neural connectivity of all the groups. The researchers specifically noted a significant reduction in alpha and beta brainwaves.
And that reduction is the biological smoking gun. Alpha and beta waves are critical markers of active cognition.
Okay, break that down. Alpha first.
Alpha waves are associated with the state of relaxed, focused attention and the engagement of working memory.
Got it. And beta.
Beta waves dominate our normal waking state of consciousness. They spike when our attention is directed towards complex cognitive tasks, problem solving, and active engagement with the outside world.
So, if both of those are reduced...
A severe reduction in these waves indicates a state of profound underengagement. The brain is effectively going to sleep at the wheel while the algorithm drives.
You know, the self-driving car analogy is so perfect here. It's like outsourcing your daily commute to an autonomous vehicle. For the first few weeks, it's amazing. You sit back, you drink your coffee, you read a book.
It feels like a luxury.
Right. But after a year of never actively navigating that route yourself, you suddenly realize you have completely forgotten how to drive to your own neighborhood. The mental map is simply gone.
It just fades away.
And this decay showed in the participants' output. The MIT researchers described the essays from the AI-reliant group as soulless. The AI created this tight, creative echo chamber of highly repetitive vocabulary and syntactic structures. Everyone in group 3 started sounding exactly the same.
It was the homogenization of thought we discussed earlier, made visible in real time on paper.
So, to use that self-driving car analogy again, how does this actually work in the brain? If I stop navigating, or if I stop struggling to find the right vocabulary word in Spanish, what physically happens to that specific road in my brain?
To understand that mechanism, we have to look at the biology of neuroplasticity and a substance called myelin. The human brain is not a static, solid-state hard drive. It is highly plastic.
Meaning it changes shape.
Basically,
Yeah.
It constantly reorganizes itself by forming new neural connections throughout your life. When you learn a new skill like conjugating a verb in a new language, neurons fire together. And there's a biological axiom, neurons that fire together, wire together.
Or use it or lose it.
Literally.
Yeah.
When you struggle to recall a word, that friction is a biological signal. It tells your brain, this specific neural pathway is important, fortify it. In response, the brain wraps that pathway in a fatty substance called the myelin sheath. Think of myelin as insulation on an electrical wire. The thicker the myelin, the faster and stronger the electrical signal travels. The struggle builds the myelin.
Wow. So when we use a smart ring to instantly translate a conversation, we completely bypass the struggle. We remove the biological signal.
Yes. By outsourcing the friction of language acquisition and cognitive labor to an AI, we are starving those vital neural pathways of the electrical stimulus they need to survive.
That is terrifying.
Without use, the myelin sheath literally begins to thin out. The road degrades. We cause our own cognitive architecture to atrophy. This heavily impacts not just language, but our overall executive control and long-term memory retention.
And the MIT study proved this, right?
It provided a chilling example of this. When the LLM-reliant group was suddenly forced to work without the AI tool, when the digital crutch was kicked away, they exhibited severe cognitive underengagement and an inability to even recall the information they had just produced minutes prior.
Because they didn't really write it, so they didn't really remember it.
Exactly.
The words pass through the machine, but they bypass the mind entirely. The cognitive debt is real. We are building incredibly smart devices, and in the process, we are allowing our own biological hardware to decay.
That internal decay is concerning enough. But we must also examine the external reality.
What do you mean?
What happens when these highly praised, multi-billion-dollar AI models, the ones we are trusting with our communication, what happens when they themselves break down in the real world? Because despite the relentless marketing promises of frictionless perfection, they do fail, and they fail frequently.
Right. So our internal hardware is decaying, and the external software is fundamentally flawed. Let's look at the real-world consequences of algorithmic failure. Because we've established that AI lacks human context and relies on high-dimensional vector mapping. It uses algorithmic literalism.
Yes, very literal.
And sometimes that literalism results in incredibly funny viral disasters. Let's start with some levity before we get into the heavy, high-stakes failures.
Good idea. The hospitality and tourism industry has historically been a prime victim of machine translation's inability to process cultural nuance and idiomatic expressions.
Oh, it is a goldmine of disasters. Because a small restaurant owner naturally wants to translate their menu for international tourists. So they run local, culturally specific dishes through a free AI translator.
We know how that goes.
The AI looks at the vector space, hyperliterally matches the dictionary definitions of the words without any contextual common sense, and prints the result. There are some legendary examples of this. In China, an automated system famously translated a very popular, culturally specific fried chicken dish.
So I've seen this one.
But it missed the culinary context completely, mapped the characters literally, and printed fried children on the English menus.
A horrifying surprise for any English-speaking tourist.
Absolutely horrifying, and there are so many more. There was a seafood dish that was supposed to be translated as grilled salmon with herbs.
Sounds delicious.
Right. But the AI algorithm somehow matched the phonetic proximity or spelling of the English vectors, incorrectly and confidently printed grilled salmon with herpes sauce.
Oh my goodness. One can only imagine that sales for that particular dish plummeted instantly.
I would certainly hope so. Then you have a mystery meat dish in a local market translated boldly as roasted husband.
Goodness.
And my personal favorite, a Japanese hotel that was trying to cater to an upscale Western palate by offering veal. But the AI translated the concept hyper-literally based on the root words for young and cow, and served up child of cow. It leaves tourists completely baffled.
While these examples provide amusement, they perfectly illustrate the core architectural vulnerability of the technology.
Which is?
AI pattern matching completely fails to account for idiomatic context, phonetic nuance, and emotional tone. It cannot play the language game we talked about with Wittgenstein.
Right, doesn't get the context.
And when you scale that precise failure mechanism up from a local restaurant menu to a global corporate environment, the results are no longer funny. They become exceptionally costly.
This brings us to a concept I was reading about called transcreation. Can you explain the mechanics of transcreation? Because it seems to be the exact human skill that algorithms just cannot replicate.
I can absolutely explain.
I understand it as basically translating the vibe or the emotional intent rather than the dictionary words. Is that accurate?
Translating the vibe is a colloquial but highly accurate way to describe it, actually. Transcreation is a portmanteau of translation and creation.
Okay.
It is the complex process of adapting a message from one language to another while painstakingly maintaining the original intent, style, tone, and emotional resonance. It is not about a word-for-word exchange. It is about recreating the psychological feeling of the message for a completely new cultural audience.
And humans just naturally do this effortlessly. Like, if I tell a joke that relies on an American pop culture reference and a human interpreter needs to translate it for an audience in Mumbai, they won't translate my literal words.
No, because it wouldn't be funny.
Exactly. They will swap my reference out for a Bollywood reference that gets the exact same laugh. They transcreate the humor. And AI just translates the literal words of the American reference, and the entire audience in Mumbai just stares in confused silence.
Precisely. And global businesses that rely on AI literalism instead of human transcreation pay a heavy financial price. There's a premier historical case study involving the global bank HSBC.
Oh, this one is brutal.
It really is. They had a massively successful domestic marketing tagline, "Assume nothing."
Which is a great slogan. You absolutely want your financial institution to be careful.
Indeed. It was meant to convey diligence, thoroughness, the idea of a bank that leaves no stone unturned and takes no unnecessary risks with your money.
Right.
But when HSBC rolled this campaign out internationally, they relied heavily on literal translation processes. The machine treated language as a strict mathematical equation. Assume equals X, nothing equals Y.
Uh-oh.
In several key international markets, the tagline was translated flawlessly in terms of strict grammar, but disastrously in terms of meaning. The vector mapping resulted in a phrase that rendered as, do nothing.
Oh no, HSBC, do nothing. Literally the absolute worst possible message you could project for a financial institution tasked with actively managing and growing your life savings.
It was the exact antithesis of the brand's intent. Correcting this localization failure, pulling the global ads, rebranding and launching massive damage control campaigns cost HSBC an estimated $10 million.
$10 million evaporated because a machine didn't understand the emotional tone of the word assume.
Exactly.
And it's not an isolated incident. More recently, KFC tried to translate their marketing copy "Grill with Confidence" for the Spanish-speaking market. The AI translation came back as "asa con confianza." Now, grammatically, it's flawless. The verb is conjugated correctly, but culturally, it completely missed the mark. Native Spanish speakers noted that it sounded like a rigid, aggressive command, like a military general barking in order to barbecue, rather than persuasive, friendly marketing copy.
Which is not great for selling chicken.
Not at all. It confused and alienated consumers. It proves that AI treats a high-stakes, multi-million-dollar branding campaign with the exact same probabilistic, mathematically flat guesswork as it treats a casual text message. It doesn't know the stakes.
And that lack of awareness regarding the stakes is where we must transition to the most serious and alarming aspect of our discussion today.
Yeah, this gets really dark.
A $10 million branding mistake is painful for a corporation. But when algorithmic translation fails in matters of human rights, life, and liberty, the consequences are catastrophic and irreversible.
This is the part of the research that legitimately stopped me in my tracks. We are looking at the rapid, largely unregulated integration of generative AI translation tools into the United States immigration and asylum system.
It's happening very quickly.
Aid organizations, legal teams, and even government contractors are increasingly using these automated tools to process incredibly complex, trauma-laden asylum cases.
If we connect this to the bigger picture and look closely at the architecture of these systems, we see a fatal structural flaw in how these models process minority languages.
Okay, walk us through that.
We discussed earlier that English is the overwhelmingly dominant training data. So what happens when an AI needs to translate between two non-Western languages, or from a resource-poor language into English?
It struggles.
The generative models suffer from massive training gaps in their vector spaces. To bridge these gaps, the system uses English as a hidden intermediary layer.
Let's make sure the mechanics of that are crystal clear for the listeners. If an asylum seeker is speaking Pashto and the digital system needs to process it into Spanish for a specific legal filing, the AI doesn't just go straight from Pashto to Spanish.
No, it doesn't.
It maps the Pashto input into an English mathematical representation in its latent space, and then it translates that English representation into the Spanish target language.
Correct. It passes through the English vector space as a bridge. And in that hidden intermediary step, context, cultural nuance, and critical legal specifics are heavily distorted or entirely lost.
Wow.
It is like taking a highly complex, deeply cultural recipe, translating it into basic chemical formulas, and then trying to pick a completely different cultural dish using only those formulas. The essence is destroyed at the intermediary node.
And the human impact of this systemic failure is horrifying. I was reading a detailed breakdown from a global language justice collective called Respond Crisis Translation. They analyze a massive data set of Afghan asylum cases that were processed using machine translation apps.
And the numbers were staggering.
They reported an estimated 40% error rate. 40%. In a strict legal proceeding where a single factual inconsistency can destroy your credibility and get you deported back to a war zone.
The specific nature of these errors is particularly revealing of the AI's mechanistic blindness.
Yeah, tell them about the names.
The legal applications were documented translating the actual names of the asylum seekers into random months of the year.
Which instantly destroys the legal timeline of their documents. If your sworn testimony suddenly claims January was present at an event instead of a person named Jenin, the judge flags it as a discrepancy.
Furthermore, the system was entirely reversing the meaning of complex sentences. It wasn't just slightly off in tone, it was stating the exact opposite of what the speaker was claiming under oath.
There was one highly specific, tragic instance detailed in the data where a woman was giving an account of severe domestic abuse. Crucial life-saving details required to grant her asylum, and the translation application repeatedly broke down.
It couldn't handle it.
It hallucinated. It garbled the syntax so badly that the attending attorneys completely missed her account. The machine literally silenced her trauma because the probabilistic math couldn't process the emotional distress, the cultural context of the abuse, and the complex syntax of her testimony.
It is vitally important to look at this systemic failure impartially, focusing purely on the mechanics of the technology rather than the political discourse surrounding immigration policy itself.
Right, this isn't about politics, it's about accuracy.
Regardless of one's political stance, the integrity of any legal system demands absolute accuracy. When translation fails in an asylum hearing, the direct result is an unfounded, legally flawed denial of rights based entirely on a machine hallucination.
It's just unconscionable.
It underscores unequivocally the absolute irreplaceable necessity for human interpreters. In high-stakes environments, you require a human mind that can navigate emotional distress, read terrified body language, understand deep cultural complexities, and recognize when a statement needs gentle clarification. An algorithm cannot pause a hearing to gently ask a traumatized victim to clarify a pronoun.
No, it can't. It proves that throwing frictionless automation at a profoundly human crisis is ethically indefensible. The stakes of human life are simply too high to rely on a 200-millisecond probabilistic guess.
Precisely. The technology is vastly powerful, but it is entirely devoid of judgment. It cannot carry the weight of human consequence.
We have covered immense ground today. We really started with the absolute marvel of ambient smart glasses and Babelfish wearables. We explored the philosophical warnings of Wittgenstein's language games, the alarming brainwave decay and myelin depletion observed at MIT, the viral absurdity of hyperliteral menus, and the catastrophic failures in immigration courtrooms.
It's a lot to process.
Let's try to synthesize all of this. It seems that AI translation is truly the ultimate double-edged sword.
It is a profound paradox. We cannot and should not deny its utility. It democratizes basic communication. It allows for the rapid, frictionless exchange of logistical data across the globe, powering supply chains and open-source coding forums.
Right. It works for the data.
But that convenience demands a heavy, often invisible toll. It threatens our neuroplasticity, letting our internal cognitive pathways atrophy. It risks the homogenization of global culture into a bland, sterile English 2.0.
Yeah.
And it fails disastrously precisely when we need it most, when deep nuance, transcreation, or human empathy is required.
There's one final, incredibly poignant piece of data I came across that perfectly captures the tragedy of this double-edged sword. And I want you, the listener, to really think about this. It's a phenomenon researchers are calling the paradox of accessibility.
Yes, this data is very telling. The data strongly suggests that organic, unassisted English proficiency is actually actively declining among youth in several developing nations.
Which seems entirely counterintuitive. I mean, we have the internet. We are more globally connected than ever before in human history.
We are connected, yes, but via a machine intermediary. Because auto-dubbing and flawless AI translation are now the default settings on almost all digital platforms. From YouTube to TikTok, young users never have to struggle to understand a foreign video or read a foreign text.
It's all just handed to them.
Exactly. The translation is ambient. It requires no cognitive effort. The tragic irony here is that technology designed to make us globally connected is actively creating a more linguistically isolated generation, a generation that may soon refuse to engage with any foreign media or culture unless it is pre-translated, sanitized, and spoon-fed to them by an algorithm.
So what does this all mean? We asked a core question at the very beginning of this deep dive. Do we still need to learn English or any language in the AI era? Do we still need to put in the hours, face the frustration, cry over the grammar, and endure the agonizing friction of learning?
And I think the answer is clear.
The overwhelming answer from the neurobiology, the philosophy, and the real-world legal data is
Yes.
more than ever. Because learning a language isn't just about utility anymore. It isn't just a tool for international business. It is an irreplaceable pillar of your cognitive health.
Absolutely.
It is how you keep your brain plastic, myelinated, and alive. And it is the only way to achieve genuine, empathetic human connection in a world that is desperately trying to automate it away.
You are not just learning vocabulary words. You are learning how to perceive reality through another culture's conceptual lens. You are learning humility. You are retaining your uniquely human capacity to hear what remains unsaid.
I want to leave you, our listener, with one final thought to mull over, something that builds on everything we've discussed today. Imagine a few years from now, when AI translation inevitably becomes entirely flawless, when the synthesized voice whispering in your earpiece is completely indistinguishable from native human speech.
Perfect tone, perfect syntax.
Perfect tone, perfect syntax, zero latency. In that future, when linguistic perfection is cheap, ambient, and fully automated, will the rare, clumsy, unassisted human mistake actually become the new marker of authenticity?
Oh, that's a brilliant thought.
If someone stumbles over their words, uses the wrong verb tense, and blushes, will we cherish that? Will a broken, struggled through sentence in a second language become the ultimate luxury? Because in a world drowning in algorithmic perfection, that clumsy, awkward human friction might be the very last proof we have that someone is truly, authentically speaking to us from the heart.
A fascinating prospect. The imperfection itself becomes the indisputable proof of humanity.
Think about that the next time you find yourself struggling for the right word. That struggle is exactly what makes you human. Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you next time.